guys, welcome to this video on the ramp work. And basically the idea of ramp work is pretty simple. Ian Jeffries, an American coach, created this for athletes that he trained for American football, and we basically took on board that as we were looking for a warm-up procedure that was basically going to tick all the boxes, and that alongside with some other good warm-up techniques basically was utilized here at RealFitX. And we tried to basically take it on board what was done with the athletes, but obviously then bring it into our everyday athletes rather than having it be specific to people that do more than athletic sort of training and everything else, American football, athletics, and all the rest of it. We tried to think, how can we bring it then into our workouts for our everyday athletes, people that are just interested in moving better, being fitter, being stronger, being leaner. These things are pretty much in parallel to what athletes do, but we didn't want to make it too sort of like out there and athletic based, because we're not all sort of athletes that are training every day. We just want to get the most out of the best training practices, best training protocols. So what do you need for your ramps? Well, generally speaking, the minimalist equipment I normally get people is a TheraBand or some sort of band that you can wrap around things, and a foam roller. Those two things should then set you out pretty well with all the things that we try to set up from there. Ramp simply means to R, raise your body temperature, A, activate key muscles, M, mobilize key joints, and then P, was potentiate under the original protocol, but we just say prepare the body basically, because that's the kind of idea. Prepare the body, prepare the nervous system, get everything prepared and ready for that particular endeavor that you're going to do. Because you might use it before your training, you might be using it before you do a particular sport or activity. You might just be doing it obviously as a bit of recovery on your off days. All those are good places to add a ramp in there. It only takes about 5 to 10 minutes if you want to go through really quickly once on all the exercises, or you can go up to 15 minutes if you want to really spend much time on it. But the general rule is 10 minutes should be enough to get you warm, get you ready for the session ahead. Now, ramp isn't the actual order in which you do that particular activity. So obviously you're not raising your temperature before you then move on to activation and then moving on to mobilization. Truthfully, it's going to be MARP probably is the right foremost. That it just doesn't sound as cool, does it? It doesn't sound as sort of well put together as ramp. You're ramping yourself up for the session. That sounds good. So the actual order of it isn't as it's stated, but the general idea is there. So you're raising the body temperature. That will happen throughout that warm-up. You're starting off pretty cold obviously when you come in, and as you go through that session you're warming up more and more. Hopefully by the end your joints and your body and everything else is much warmer and you're ready to go. Whether you've got a sweat on or not isn't as important as just make sure that you're ready to go after you finish that warm-up. You feel good and you're moving well, and then you can start concentrate on getting ready for whatever the session entails that particular day. Then you've got your activation of key muscles. Obviously you go through the main points, the main areas we want to make sure we activate, starting with the quads, the glutes, okay, the upper back, and then the core musculature. So basically anything around the sort of core. Now we like to add the traps into the core because it's basically all the torso area, but really what you're thinking about is how can you get the core activated, ready for that session, ready to stabilize for the main lifts. Your upper back obviously pulls back your shoulders and gets you more healthy upper back and upper body. Your glutes and your quads, if they're activated, then obviously they're going to make sure that your hips are open and you're ready to go, and that anything like squatting, lunging, hinging, anything from there, your body's ready to take that on board. So they're the main key areas you want to activate before you start that session. In terms of mobility, as I say, that probably goes before the activation, before even raising the body temperature. But your mobility wants to make sure that you're opening out, or at least getting more mobile in the ankles, the hips, okay, your T-spine, and then your shoulder girdles, making sure you've obviously got full rotation and full movement in the shoulders. People will be tight in different areas, more tight so maybe in the hips and the T-spine or the shoulders. So those are obviously areas we want to work on, but generally each session is going to be full bodied, so we want to make sure that we're mobilizing at least one upper and one lower sort of body area at a time, and that makes sure we get good balance through the week, and everything's getting opened out from there. And then the last thing is obviously to prepare. When you're preparing for that session ahead, generally speaking, if you do the activation, you do the mobility, your body will be warming up, and then you can go into your main event. And generally then we warm up, we might actually spend that time in the session ramping up to a top performance and everything else from there. But if you do all the things right in the first few bits, then you'll be prepared and you'll be ready to go and you'll be powered up ready. So as I say, starting off with the mobility, we actually run it in that particular order. So you actually start with your mobility work, you then do some activation work, and then you should be ready to go into there. And mobility will include foam rolling or lacrosse balls. I don't have one hand right now, but they're a bit smaller obviously and get into the muscle a bit more. As I say, for foam rolling, you can pick 1 to 3 movements that you want to work on. So it might be that you want to roll out the shoulder, your lats, okay, and then maybe your quads, and that, you know, maybe you're doing lots of overhead pressing and clean and presses or anything like that. Then there'd be 3 good areas to work through from there. Generally, we look at 2 again, so we look at maybe rolling out the quads and the upper back, or the lats and the glutes. It could be a number of ones depending on either A, where you're tight on that particular session, or B, what that session entails and where you want to do the rolling up from there. Now, as with everything in Real Fit X, it's generally we try to work to a particular template, and then if you want to add or take away things, you can do that. And what I will normally say to people is that we'll give you a particular ramp to do in the session, but if you're tight, for example, in your glutes that particular day, you're finding it hard to hinge and move over, it makes no sense rolling out your quads and your shoulders. You might as well start rolling out the glutes and start opening up your glutes. So the good thing to do is to start learning more and more about what the exercises are, the best exercises are, and what the best mobility and foam rolling and everything else is from there, and that's what we try and teach you on the Real Fit X program. So once you've done your foam rolling and you've picked your particular muscles, we then do a couple of mobility movements. Now again, that could be 1, 2 or 3 mobility movements, opening up different areas of the body. Again, I like to pick 2 from the main session, so 2 rolls and then 2 mobility movements, and again, trying to find 1 for the more upper body, so either the T-spine or the shoulder, and then 1 for the lower body, more the hips or the ankles as we go down from there. Now, you've got a couple of different options. You obviously have a static and you have a dynamic. So with static stretching, that is when you are basically going into a position. Let's say when I stretch out our hip flexors, you might just go into a hip flexor stretch, squeeze at the glutes, open out the hips and hold that position. That will make sure that you're opening up those hips, okay, and you're ready to go. Or if you want it to be a bit more dynamic with it, you might need to start adding some pulses in there, maybe some arm raises, and that would then start adding in a bit of dynamism. I really struggle with that word, I don't know why I try to use it from there. But then also you might be doing something like what we like to call a strider. So from that position there, you're going to the downward dog, into that strider, you're opening up those hips, but then you alternate between the two. This is a dynamic sort of movement. Again, even more dynamic than the one we just did off of that hip flexor stretch. So with your static stretches, obviously you're holding that position. Again, it could be for time or for breaths or whatever you want to from there. And then with the dynamic ones, we normally do it for reps because you're actually moving from one rep to the other, and that could be between 5 to 10 reps on each side if you're doing it on, unilaterally, one leg after the other, or alternating. Or if you're doing a bilateral one, then it could just be 5 to 10 reps. And that is that. So that's your mobility taken care of. You've done your foam rolling, you've done some form of static or dynamic sort of stretch. Then we move on to the activation. Now this is where it gets really, really what you think about the ramp is that it's a rehab/prehab based session that allows you to get prepared for your sessions ahead. What we want to make sure is that you don't need to be doing these on the regular, and that you need to stop the other training and just concentrate on these. That's what your physio will get you to do, obviously, if you get an injury. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get the body moving the best it can so you don't have those injuries that will stop you training in the long run. And so a lot of the exercises for your activation are based off of kind of physio-based movements, okay? So for example, if you wanted to activate your quads, we might do a TKE banded setup, okay? So we'll wrap the band around the leg, and this one really gets into those quads, and what you do here is you just bend at the knee slightly, lifting the heel off the floor, and then extend and squeeze that quad. So this will activate your quad muscles, obviously, and this is a good physio movement for just getting people fired up, especially if people can't lunge or get into positions without pain in the knees or without dysfunction actually kicking in at that stage. Just something as simple as that is just going to get that quad fired up, ready to go. You could do things like face pulls, you could do things like X-band walks, where you're just firing up the glutes. Just step into that, go into my X-band walk, and then just step from side to side. So a band, as you can see, is super versatile. It allows you to do multiple different movements, and it allows you to activate the right muscles for you. And again, 1 to 3 exercises. I generally pick 3 because I like to go around in that circuit fashion. And if you are looking to increase the temperature even more, you can add a 4th in there, which is pretty cheeky, or change one of them to a more of a cardio-based thing. So you could like put a rowing machine or some incline hill walks or a prowler push in there just to get that temperature going up a little higher. I normally do that when it's super cold, just to get the body moving a little bit more, but factor that in as you're going through. Really, you want to make sure you, again, 3 rounds, generally speaking, of around about 10 to 15 repetitions on each movement should be enough then to spend about 6 minutes or so, 5 to 6 minutes, getting the body activated and ready to go from there. And as I say, really concentrate on the muscle contraction. It's not really that important to be trying to bust out as many reps as you can or as many rounds as you can. The goal of the warm-up of the ramp is to get the body working. So you want nice, slow, controlled movements, getting the body activated and getting it ready to go. And then really concentrating on that upper back, core, and then either the glutes or the quads and the lower body. Generally, most sessions is going to get you through and get you warm and get you ready to go. And obviously the last bit is that preparedness. Now, obviously that's just a part of it. If you go through each section, if you mobilize all the key areas that you need to for that session and you activate the key muscles, then you should be prepared for that session ahead. But what you can then do is then add in another 5 minutes or so where you're practicing whatever it is you're going to be doing that day. If you're doing Olympic lifts, you might want to throw in some jumps, you might want to throw in some high pulls, you might want to throw in actually just light barbells or, you know, an empty barbell, practicing the movements. You know, it's really up to you what you try to do within that time, but my personal preference is once you've gone through that ramp, that 10-minute ramp should be enough to get you ready, and then when you go into the real X sessions, our strength and power-based sessions, normally we ramp up the weights ready to go anyway, and then when we get to the muscle or conditioning side of things, we're fired up and ready to go. So that's what we use that strength and power-based stuff for anyway. So that's a quick introduction, as I say guys, to what we do. There'll be more videos coming along as we go that will explain more detail the exercises that you can start using, what the muscles are they work and all the rest of it, but this gives you a good little overview of what ramp work is and how it can help get you into a position where you're training better, you're training at a higher performance and you actually start hitting those goals and allowing your body to actually move and feel better as well when you're out of your sessions. Hope you enjoyed that guys, just be awesome, go get that day and I'll speak to you guys soon. Catch you later.